What if the best way to judge a presidency is to stand in the room where it ended? Then look backward at the one decision that refused to die with it? If that sounds morbid, good! History is a little morbid. It's also honest. Presidents leave office in 100 human ways.
Stroke, bullet, bad water, quiet sleep. But the choices they made keep walking long after the heart monitor goes flat.
Tonight, we follow those footsteps. Franklin Delano Roosevelt doesn't die on a battlefield or in a motorcade.
He's in Warm Springs, Georgia, posing for a portrait, when he leans forward and says, almost politely,
"I have a terrific headache." And the lights go out inside his skull. The man who hauled America out of the Great Depression and through most of World War II leaves behind a scaffolding with names that sound like alphabet soup.
The SEC, the FDIC, Social Security, that still props up millions of ordinary Tuesdays.
The war finishes without him. The New Deal doesn't. Spin the camera back a century and a half to Mount Vernon, where George Washington is losing a different kind of war.
Doctors open veins to balance the humors, draining an astonishing portion of his blood while his throat swells shut.
The first president's greatest act was not a battle. It was restraint. He sets the two-term precedent, steps away from power on purpose, and writes the user manual for a republic that wants leaders, not kings. John Adams proves what a presidency looks like when you choose peace over applause.
In the middle of a hot political fever called the Quasi-War with France, he swallows the easy slogan and sends diplomats. He pays for it at the ballot box, but he buys the country time.
Years later, he dies on July 4, 1826, same day as Thomas Jefferson,
The man who doubled the nation with the Louisiana Purchase and founded a university because he believed ideas should have a campus.
Independence Day becomes Exit Day because 5 years after that, James Monroe, the hands-off-the-Western Hemispherical Monroe Doctrine guy, bows out on July 4 as well. Coincidence? Absolutely! Chills anyway. Not every ending is cinematic. Some are plumbing. William Henry Harrison, famous for serving just 31 days, long blamed a chilly inauguration for his pneumonia. Modern historians point to a grosser culprit: contaminated water around the White House. If true, the shortest presidency wasn't undone by a speech. It was undone by a pipe. His death hardens the culture of succession. The vice president isn't a spare tire. He's the next driver. Zachary Taylor tastes summer the wrong way. Iced milk and cherries after a broiling Washington day.
Spirals into a catastrophic gastrointestinal illness and is gone within the week.
The conspiracy rumor mill eventually runs an arsenic test. The needle barely moves. Taylor's legacy is a stubborn line. He resists the sprite of slavery into new territories, trying to bottle a civil war with policy before anyone is ready to admit the bottle is already broken. Abraham Lincoln is the hinge of the whole story. He sits in Ford's Theater.
And when the bullet hits, it doesn't just end a life. It compresses the Civil War into one terrible second you can hear on a stage.
But the Emancipation Proclamation doesn't die. The Union doesn't die.
The idea that the presidency can be a moral loudspeaker doesn't die. The Reconstruction he wanted fractures without him. Proof that choices can outlive a man. While plans still need their architect. President James A. Garfield shows how progress sometimes arrives, wearing a black suit.
Shot in a train station, he doesn't die from the bullet so much as from what came next. Probing, infection, no sterile technique. Yet the public horror sparks the push toward professional civil service. Hire on merit, not patronage.
A short presidency turns into a long reform.
William McKinley looks like he'll beat it. He's stable after an anarchist's bullet, and gangrene quietly wins. The United States he leaves behind isn't the shy teenager of 1776 anymore.
It's an imperial adult with territories after the Spanish-American War and a gold standard certainty running the economy. His death yanks Theodore Roosevelt onto the stage, and the country's tempo changes overnight. Let's visit one of the strangest rooms in American governance. A sick room behind a presidency.
Woodrow Wilson suffers a massive stroke in 1919 while trying to sell the League of Nations to a wary country.
For months, the public gets an edited version of their president, and the First Lady becomes a gatekeeper.
The League fails in the Senate. The idea succeeds later under a different name.
Sometimes the policy outlives the sales pitch and the salesman.
Theodore Roosevelt goes out like a myth should, in his sleep.
But the square deal stays awake.
Trust busting, consumer protection, and a national park system. So big you could lose a decade inside it and not get bored. He dies. The map he drew in green ink doesn't. Dwight Eisenhower, the general who learned how to end a war,
Leaves office with something more prosaic than a victory parade.
He dies of heart disease, a boring end for a man famous for D-Day, which is exactly the point.
The infrastructure outlasts the headlines. John F. Kennedy's assassination locks the country in a television trance. You can watch the moment frame by frame. You can hear history gasp.
But what keeps breathing is the big homework assignment he gave America.
The line he drew in the air becomes footprints in the dust, and the tech economy catches a ride on the rocket. The moral homework, civil rights, passes to Lyndon B. Johnson, who signs the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act,
Then dies later of a heart attack. Proof that a pen can be heavier than a rifle.
Harry Truman faces a decision that no president, before or after, has faced in exactly the same way.
End a world war with atomic fire, or continue a conventional bloodletting.
He chooses the bombs, then builds the post-war order with the Marshall Plan and NATO. The stuff of acronyms that still yank headlines 80 years later. He dies in 1972. The alliances he nailed together are still arguing.
And that's how you know they're alive.
Richard Nixon dies of a stroke years after resigning, his name permanently stapled to the word Watergate.
And yet the same ledger holds Detente and the opening to China. A split-screen legacy only history could love and only time could hold in focus.
Ulysses S. Grant loses his last battle to throat cancer, but wins the last campaign, writing his memoirs at speed to secure his wife's future. As president, he tries to keep Reconstruction honest, sending the federal government against the first waves of organized white terror. He dies broke. His book becomes a classic. His fight becomes a warning
That rights need more than ink.
Ronald Reagan fades into a long Alzheimer's twilight and dies of pneumonia complications in 2004. What doesn't fade is the rhetorical architecture he built. A smaller government vocabulary, a high-trust relationship with the camera,
and a Cold War victory narrative that, fairly or not, many Americans still recite without looking up.
George H.W. Bush slips away in 2018 at 984, the last World War II veteran president.
The Gulf War coalition he built remains the gold standard for how to get almost everyone to show up.
And the Americans with Disabilities Act he signed quietly changes everyday life for millions.
Curb cuts and ramps and workplace rights that don't shout, they just work.
And because history loves symmetry, we loop back to the oddities.
3 presidents, Adams, Jefferson, Monroe, dying on the 4th of July. William Henry Harrison possibly undone by the water more than the weather. Zachary Taylor's cherries and milk cautionary tale. Garfield and McKinley, proof that a single second can redirect the country. FDR and JFK, proof that a single sentence can be the whole obituary.
I have a terrific headache. We chose to go to the moon.
Here's the thesis the tombstones keep whispering. A presidency doesn't really end when the body does.
Washington's exit becomes a rule.
Jefferson's purchase becomes a map. Lincoln's order becomes a nation. FDR's bureaucracy becomes Tuesday morning. Truman's alliances become tomorrow's meeting. LBJ's signatures become someone's first vote.
The heart stops. The consequences don't. If you're still here, you already understand the trick. We didn't just tour how presidents died, we toured how their choices lived.
And if you want more, say the word. And we'll do the last words episode next. Because some of those final sentences are a whole second term in a single breath.